So I've had the opportunity, I've counseled hundreds and hundreds of couples. And on a regular basis, I would see couples doing things that just absolutely made my jaw drop. If I had $1, if every time I walked out and said to my wife, it's a match made in heaven, but they're living in Gehenna. And the strange part was intelligent people, good people, and just doing things that just really, they couldn't possibly understand the damage that they were doing to the relationship. And as I began working with more and more couples, I reached certain conclusions, one of which is, this is not a statistic, it's not real, but it's my assessment. My assessment is that 80% of the gittin that are written in our community should not be. I mean, it's not like Hashem lost his touch, and not like suddenly people became so dysfunctional that they couldn't remain married, but rather people forgot what it means to be married. And there really, obviously, there should be a good bit of education. Unfortunately, there isn't. There's a lack of curriculum. So I wrote the book, The 10 Really Dumb Mistakes, which I was hoping would be exactly that, sort of giving people some guidance, some understanding, a basic curriculum. Now, I made the discovery that if you're under 30, you can't read. You're either illiterate or you just won't read. So I came out with the video book. What we're going to do now is going to go through some of the material in the video book and just sort of highlight how to use it, how to approach it. And I do welcome questions. I very much would want this to be interactive, but let me just get first a little bit of a run, give you an idea of some of the highlights. More than anything, the points that I think need to be stressed, because again, so many times, especially when you're dealing with couples either who aren't married yet or even in the beginning stages of marriage, so many times there's just such lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, lack of fundamentally understanding the relationship, gender differences, what a marriage needs. So let's do this. Let's take a look from 35,000 feet and let's see if we can get an understanding of the material. And let's start with the following. So in the inside cover, you'll see right over here, there's a, it's going to play in a minute because it plays once I open it. But inside the cover, you'll see a very clear guide to what's in there. Now, I really grouped it by categories because I think it really works out well that way. And let's go through some of the categories because hopefully it'll make it clear. So the first chapter is the relationship. Now, it's my understanding that there are 3 pillars to a successful relationship: commitment, love, and learning to live together. Commitment comes from one clear understanding. That is that Hashem does not make mistakes. Hashem knows what he's doing. Hashem manages bito shaploni laponi. But you see, there are really 2 parts to this to understand. Number 1, Hashem loves me more than I love me. And number 2, Hashem knows better than I what's for my best. You see, this part, the commitment part, I think is vital that you give over to people, and that we give over to people, because invariably in any marriage, there are going to be times where either he or she or sometimes both wake up and they say those words, "Oh my goodness, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I married the wrong one." And this is so common. And by the way, I made that point in the book because I think it's needed to be stressed so that people understand when they wake up and say, "Oh my goodness, what did I get myself into?" And that's normal, that's regular, that's when it's time to get to work. So pillar number 1 is commitment. Commitment, knowing that Hashem doesn't make mistakes, that Hashem knows what he's doing. Hashem chose the right one for me. The second pillar is love. Love is the glue of a marriage. Love is the glue, meaning to say it's what keeps things together on a day-to-day basis, keeps the couple moving in the right way. And this is a line that I believe is correct, that Hollywood got it 100% right. Hollywood nailed it on the head, except Hollywood got it backwards. You see, in the world of Hollywood, we fall in love and we get married. We fall out of love, we get unmarried. The mystery of life, why people fall in love, why people fall out of love, we don't know. Number 1, and this needs to be stressed over and over, the reason why I marry this person is not because I'm in love, not because I'm in la la land, or not even because I'm infatuated. The reason I marry this person is because I firmly believe that this is the one that Hashem chose for me, the right one, the perfect one, the ideal match. And that is the criteria for selection. However, while love has nothing to do with that selection, if you then don't work on a powerful bond of love and connection in your marriage, you're going to find yourselves in very difficult straits, because the glue of a successful marriage is the love. And that requires understanding that love is built and there are many tools that bond. Now, in the book, I spent more time on some of the tools that bond, but this is an understanding that has to be gotten out there, that people have to understand that love isn't just, I fell in love and I'm deeply, madly, passionately in love forever and ever. It's something that requires understanding how to build it, There are many tools that Hashem gave us. There's romantic love, there's physical intimacy, there's respect, appreciation, friendship. All of them build to this pinnacle, to the goal. The goal is real giving, loving bond and attachment, but you have to use the tools, and only by using the tools do things work. Okay, now, in the first part, the relationship part, I personally have two goals, both in the book as well as in the video book. Goal number one, and ladies, I want you to hear what I'm saying to you. Goal number one is to let people understand that they need to work on the relationship and what that actually means. Meaning to say, everyone has this idea, oh, I'm going to work on my marriage, I'll work on my marriage. But what does that mean? And working on the love in the marriage is not simple at all. Again, in the book itself, I spend more time in it, and I'm sure you spend much time in your own work with the collars, but it's very, very important that you give over the tools and what works and what doesn't. So that's one goal, just to understand that it's something that requires work. But there's a second goal that I have, and that's called creating real expectations. And more importantly, normalizing reality. So if you've dealt with collars for a while, or you deal with chassans, you'll know the famous line, we're two reasonable people, we made up, we're not going to fight. Listen, we're mature, we're adults, and we made up, we're not going to fight. And I believe every chassan and kala firmly makes that up. They decide they're not going to bicker, they're not going to quabble, they're going to just work things out. And then they get married and they have the first fight. And by the way, people ask me, when should you read the book? That's when you read the book, because until then it's la la land. I cannot tell you how many times, and I'm sure you have this yourself, I'll deal with chassan, with a kala, sometimes with both, and I can't talk to them because it's going to be perfect. We're going to love each other, and we're going to be so respectful, and we're going to be so, and it's wonderful, and it's ideal, but in the real thick and thin of life, it's not how it works out. So what I try to give over in the first part is, number one, what I call reality flash number one, you will fight. And it's imperative that couples understand this, because you see, many times, it could be at the Sheva brachas even, or it could be the first week or the second week or the third week of marriage. Something happens, he said, she said, before you know it, they're in different places, and suddenly words are said, and each of them have this attitude, oh my goodness, obviously this isn't meant to be. And unless they understand that that's normal, unfortunately a part of real marriage, part of real life, it could lead to a lot more trouble than it should. So reality flash number one that I try to give over, and I think it's very important, is that unfortunately, with the best of intentions, with the best of midos, unfortunately part of the reality of life is we're going to cause each other hardship, we're going to cause each other not meaning to, not intending to, but invariably words will be said, we won't recognize the sensitivity, I didn't realize it would hurt you, and the simple reality is you will fight. But reality flash number two, and this one is a little bit harder. And this one may be difficult to tell over to kalas, but I tell it to chassanim all the time. The person who will hurt you more deeply than you've ever been hurt before in your life is your spouse. But the person who will get you angrier than you've ever been in your life is your spouse. And sometimes I even say, and I'll hate to say this here, but sometimes even the person you hate more than you've ever hated anyone in your life might be a spouse. But here's the point. The point is that doesn't mean you don't have or can't have a good marriage. There's a simple reality. Marriage is the closest relationship that any two human beings will ever have. And when two human beings are that emotionally connected, they're both extremely vulnerable. But extremely vulnerable means that I have needs, expectations, sensitivities, and it's invariable that my spouse isn't going to understand them. She may be the nicest person in the world, most well-intended person, but she doesn't know my nature, she doesn't know my needs, she doesn't know my sensitivities, and without meaning to, she is going to say things that are going to hurt me. She won't even recognize it, and I won't even understand why it is that she would say something so callous, cruel, and mean. And that's unfortunately the reality of life. Now, it's very important, A, to convey this understanding that fighting it's not something we condone and not something we're interested in, but unfortunately it's part and parcel of even the best marriages. Okay, I'll grant you, Avram Avinu and Sarah Imenu didn't fight. I'm sure they didn't. The Maral says in the course of history there was never a connection between husband and wife as it was between Avram and Sarah. But short of that, it is my firm belief that there are going to be a lot of words said. And you have to understand, it's not just that we're emotionally connected, and not just that we're very vulnerable. Do you know who said that to me? And how could she say that? It's not just anyone hurt me, it's my best friend, my lover, the one who I do anything for. How could she be so mean? How could he be so cruel? And when you understand that, you begin to understand that this is part and parcel of a successful marriage, and you have to learn how to make up, you have to learn to get beyond it, but it's not the end of the world. And I think this is a very important part to convey, that unfortunately, it's not something we condone, not something we're interested in, but unfortunately, it's just part of life, because it is. And what can I tell you? I wish it weren't, but it is. But you see, when a couple walk in knowing that, suddenly the first fight or the second or third, it's not such a shock. And why is it? Many times I've heard young women say something, I'm so nice and so polite with everybody. My own husband, I say such things that are so mean. Why? Because you were hurt. You have deeply, deeply hurt. And when you're hurt, you react. And when you react, you're not thinking, you said, he said, she said, before you know it, you're deep down that rabbit hole. And so it's important to convey those 2 points. All right, so the first point is that number 1, commitment is the key. And number 2, love is the glue of the marriage, and you have to use all the tools that bond. And again, in the first chapter, I go through the various parts of this, and hopefully you'll be able to use that. And in an ideal setting, you'd want to allow the kala to listen to them ahead of time, and then as a group you review it. You have questions and things, exercises to review. The biggest problem is what I found is, when as mature people, when you read a book, or if you take a course, I'm sure you take notes, and I'm sure you review it, and I'm sure you think of how to apply it. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, most people, certainly younger people, don't do that. They're not trained to do that. They don't do it. So even if you get someone to actually read a book, or even if you get someone to actually pay attention to a video course, the actual concretizing it, it's putting it into terms and words and phrases that actually resonate with me, that I'll remember it, that I'll be able to use it. Unfortunately, something that doesn't happen that easily, so it's very important that there be chazara, that you go over it and you highlight the points, and maybe even exercise and things. But that really is the first chapter, and that's the first part, the relationship. Okay, let's move on. The second part, learning to live together. Now, again, as I mentioned, there are 3 pillars to a successful marriage. The first is commitment, and again, commitment comes from knowing that Hashem doesn't make mistakes. Hashem arranged this one to this one. Hashem found me the perfect match for me. The middle pillar is glue. The glue of the marriage is love. That's what keeps the bond together. That's what keeps a couple on a day-to-day basis going together. But here's the problem. Many, many couples are committed to the marriage. They do love each other, but it's the third pillar that gives them the most trouble, learning to live together. And this is something I think that needs to be emphasized at the earliest stages of courtship, and certainly of marriage, that learning to live together is not simple. And it's very easy to play house, and very easy, even when you're chassan and kala, I'm so polite, she's so polite, we're all so polite, and it's wonderful. But then you get married, and in the thick and thin, the heavy traffic of lights, suddenly things change. So let's begin with the following. The number 1 key point that I think needs to be emphasized again and again and again and again and again, and maybe a few more times, is that men and women are different. Now, I have a book here. I'm not going to bring it up, but this is the book. It's called Everything Men Know About Women. I love this book because it's a very, very important book. If you've seen it, you know that it's very well written. It's really, it's an amazing book. Everything Men Know About Women, and the point is that it's completely blank. 100 blank pages, and it became a bestseller. It sold over 1 million copies, and women buy it, they pick it up, they say, oh, that's exactly what my husband knows about me. Exactly. Okay. And I'd like to share with you, it is true. There's huge gaps in what men know about women. That's 100% true. But I'd like to share with you that it's also true that women tend to know even less about men. And this is one of the biggest difficulties in being successfully married. We judge our spouse based on our experience. If I experience things this way, I assume my spouse, who's a reasonable, normal person, will experience them as I. And understanding that my experience is my experience, but it doesn't define reality, is very, very, it's a long learning curve to learn that. What's interesting about men and women is only one thing that men and women have in common. By the way, I had a chassan. This was the best. A guy told me last night, he was a young married guy. He had 7 older sisters. He was the young boy, the prince of the bunch. 7 older sisters. Surely he came into marriage knowing exactly what women are like, right? And he said to me, oh my goodness, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue what women are like. But why? He's an intelligent fellow, smart guy. What's the problem? The problem is it's totally different in terms of sensitivities, in terms of aspirations, in terms of interests. Men and women are utterly completely different. And when you give this over and let Chassan and Kala understand this, I think it's a big, big step forward. There is only one thing that men and women have in common. What's that one thing? They each have selective amnesia. They totally, completely, utterly forget how different they are. And the minute that, by the way, it's true. I've seen this regularly. A young woman can know clearly men are different, and you'll go over things with her and she'll understand it. And then she gets married and she assumes that her husband's going to be just like her. Well, but isn't he supposed to be normal? Like me? Well, he is normal. But he's a guy, and guys are different than girls. And understanding husband and wife are equals, but equal and opposite is one of the key points to convey equal but opposite, but equal and opposite. And let me share with you an example, because this one, Baruch Hashem, we're married 36 years. I love my wife. I hope my wife loves me. She's not here to say otherwise, so let's assume it's a yes. I recently made a discovery which really was eye-opening to me. Number one, ladies, have you ever driven with your husband and found that he keeps the radio or the whatever may be too loud? Or you went to a chasana and he was comfortable and you weren't? I could not understand for the life of me when we were first married, and whenever we'd go on it was a vacation, whatever, we'd put on some music, and my wife, whenever it got to the comfortable level, my wife would lower it. Whenever it got to a level where it sounded, I could appreciate the music, she would lower it. And I understand, my wife's a fun-loving person, energetic. I didn't understand it. Ladies, would you like to know the great secret? I recently discovered the why. Women have a lower threshold of comfortable listening than do men. 8 decibels difference. They do studies with children in public school classes where they're mixed classes, and typically the girls sit in the front, the boys sit in the back, and the boys don't hear, because the boys need to hear things 8 decibels louder than do the girls, because the listening threshold of men is set to a higher point. And the reason why I was more comfortable hearing it loud and my wife wasn't is because I'm a man and she's a woman. Now, that should be obvious, except it wasn't. Let me share with you one more difference, because again, these differences come up all the time and they're indicative of key differences. Let's discuss something called risk tolerance. Okay, some people are risk averse, some people are risk takers. So here's a question to ask. Are men or women more risk takers, more risk averse? Where would you say they fit in? So here's an interesting statistic, and it's one of many, but here we go. You ready for this? Amongst 15 to 24-year-old men, they're 10 times more likely to die of a drowning accident than will women. Now, isn't that strange? 10 times as many young men between the age of 15 and 24 will die as will women swimming. Now you might wonder why. Is it because women are such great swimmers and men aren't? No. Is it because men swim a lot and women don't? No. It's actually something else altogether. It's, you see, when there's that sign that says, warning, riptide, and the guy says, hey, I got this, no problem, and he goes in, and a girl sees a sign that says, riptide, I'm going home. And this is not just true about swimming. It's true about fatalities on highways. When there are flash floods, there are 10 times as many men will die in a flash flooding situation as women. Why is that? Because the warning comes on the radio, warning, flash floods, and a woman goes home. And the guy says, hey, I got an SUV, 4-wheel drive, I got this. And if you think it sounds humorous, there's a very real difference. Men are much more comfortable with risk than are women. And that's only important to convey so that a young man and a young woman understand that they're different. Once you understand they're different, you understand that likely my spouse experiences things differently than I. Likely I'm going to have to compensate. I'm going to have to get used to it. And I'm going to have to adjust to the fact that someone does things differently than I. And this is the third pillar, learning to live together. But you see, men and women are so different, but let's even say they were the same. I'd like to share with you, you know why marriage is so difficult? It's so difficult because everything you do, from the moment you break that glass until, Mitzvah Hashem, 50, 80 years, whatever the number is, you do together. And that means you do these things together from the time you get up in the morning till the time you go to sleep at night, how you raise your kids, whether you vacation, where you vacation, whether you give tzedakah, where you do. Everything you do as a unit, as a group. And suddenly, what your spouse does reflects on you. What you do reflects on him. And here's the punchline. People are different. I'll give you a very interesting example. I had a young fellow who said to me, it's so strange. We're always, wherever we're together, she's always hot and I'm always cold. Isn't that funny? Wherever it is, she's always freezing and I'm always hot. I said to him, aha, good morning. I would like to explain to you when your marriage is going to start. 6 months after you're married, you're going to wake up in a sweat. And you're going to say to yourself, it's boiling hot in this apartment. I'm spending hundreds of dollars extra on heating expense because of my wife. What is the problem? Why is she carrying on? I know it's not cold. It's hot. Why is she carrying on? And this simple reality of recognizing that the way I experience things is the way I experience things, but that's not the way my spouse experiences it, is a huge, huge step forward. And folks, let's be very candid. There are different personalities. Men and women are vastly different beyond description, but even within any one particular gender, there are vast, vast differences. You have people who are high energy, people who are low energy, people who are morning people, people night people. People like to conform, people like to stand out. Some people are very spontaneous, some people are very organized. But if you take the 16 different categories of personality types, you do a psychological study, you'll find every two human beings are vastly different. And the only reason why it's easy to be a roommate or have sisters or be friends with everybody in the yeshiva or the school is because you're living parallel lives but not mixing them. And the minute you get married, suddenly you're doing everything together, and suddenly you begin to discover that it's not so easy to conform to another person's way of doing things. And folks, I have to share with you, I believe that this is one of the biggest obstacles the first year of marriage, and that is getting used to somebody else's way of doing things, accepting it as normal, and not trying to change him or her to my sense of normal. You see, it's everything that you're going to be involved in. And let me share with you what I mean. I have this sort of way of looking at things. Let's say we have 5 character traits that are different. Let's say I'm risk taker, she's risk averse. I'm spontaneous, she's very methodical. Let's say we have 10 different areas. So we're going to be fair about this. 5 my way, 5 her ways. Now here's the interesting part. These 5 character traits are going to manifest themselves many, many times during the day. So let's deal with this thing called risk averse or risk taker. Okay, what time do we leave for the wedding? The wedding is called for 8 o'clock. How much time do we leave for the what ifs? Okay, do you lock your car when you park it there or not? In fact, what about in Muncie? What about in Brooklyn? What about in Borough Park? How fast do you drive on the highway? When do you file your taxes? And do you leave your car double parked for 5 minutes? You see, that one little difference called risk averse or risk taker is going to manifest multiple times during the day until within a very short amount of time, even if we made up absolutely fairly, we're going to do everything 50-50. 5 things we're going to do absolutely my way, 5 things we're going to do her way. We're going to be totally fair about this. Do you know what's going to happen? Each of them are going to have the sense within a very short amount of time, everything we do her way. I mean, everything we do his way. Why does everything have to be his way? Her way. She's a domineering boss. He's so bratty. Why is that? And it's really quite simple. Because the minute you have to make room for another human being in your world, and then you have to adopt to their way of doing things, it's going to feel strange, it's going to feel unusual, and we're doing so many unusual things. You see, all the things that we're doing my way, that's just normal. That's the regular way people are supposed to do things. But the things that we're doing her way is my big consideration, my big giving in, and I deserve a medal of honor for it. And if you think this is simple, folks, I don't think you're married, because if you're really married in the real world, you'll see this is one of the biggest issues. So one of the great secrets that I like to share with chasans and kalas is the secret. Ladies, are you ready? If you've read the book, you may know this already, but here is the great secret. The great secret is your spouse has a deficit. Your spouse has a deficit. I guarantee it. Your spouse has a deficit. What does that mean? Either he's too quiet or irresponsible, on time or no fun, too neat, too cheap, too flighty, too meek, too sloppy, spends so much, spends a little noisy, too bold. How do I know? How do I know factually that your spouse has a deficit? It's really quite simple. Hashem put us into this world imperfect. We were given the task of perfecting ourselves. If your spouse was perfect, it'd be game over, say some l'shalom, goodbye. Let's hope that your spouse isn't perfect. And you see, that's the point. Your spouse isn't perfect, and you are as well. If your spouse didn't have a deficit, they'd be done their job, they have a deficit. But you see, that's okay in theory. But here's the practical problem. And the practical problem is that each of us, husbands, wives, and this one, it doesn't matter, it cuts 50-50, everyone becomes an expert at what their spouse does wrong. Invariably, it's going to be my strength and her weakness, And I can't help but notice again and again and again and again how it comes up, and how much more effective she'd be, and how much more happy she'd be if she were to just adopt my way. And why doesn't she change? It's good for her, and it's for her best, and she'd be much better. And I explain it to her, and I make sure she understands it, and I make sure that, and I can't help but notice it all the time. And in a very short time, we don't recognize what we're doing. What we're doing is damaging the relationship. People have different aspirations, desires, interests, dispositions, natures, tendencies, and this is the point. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, they're just different ways. And the biggest obstacle, I believe, to learning to live together happily and peacefully is learning to accept your spouse as they are. But who's going to teach him? Who's going to make him a mensch? Not you. Who's going to make her on time? Who's going to teach her not to bounce the checks? Not you. But do you understand what I'm saying? Your spouse is the way they are because that is the way they are. That's why Hashem made them. And your job is not to change them. And you're not going to change them. You won't succeed, but it's not your job. And your spouse is the way they are because that's the way Hashem made them, as you are the way you are because that is the way you are. And being able to embrace your spouse as they are is one of the most difficult parts of a successful marriage. Being able to embrace them and accept them as they are is not easy at all. You see, you really only have two choices. You either embrace them as they are, or you try to change them. So because a lot of people don't understand the implications of this, let me make it very clear. And ladies, you'll forgive me for this because ladies are probably more guilty of this than are men. But here we go. Let's imagine you've discovered that your husband, and let's say you're teaching a kala and she discovers that her chassan or her husband has a flaw, has something that, he could use improvement in. And we all could use improvement, right? So she, being a generous, giving, kindly, loving person, wants to help her chassan or her spouse be even better than he is, right? Okay, so let's make it very clear. What does it feel like to be loved, right? If I ask you to fill out give a few adjectives, a few words to describe, what does it feel like when you're loved? So most people come up with a pretty clear description: respected, accepted, approved, cherished, very nice feelings. And when you're loved, those are the feelings that you experience. Okay, good. What does it feel like when someone's trying to change you, even for your good and even for your best interest? What does it feel like to you on the receiving end? So I'll give you a clue. It feels like not respected, not accepted, not approved, not cherished. Do you understand why it wrecks the relationship? It never works. It's always going to be my strength and my spouse's weakness that I desperately need her to change, and she won't change. But why not? It's so easy for me. Yeah, exactly. It's easy for me because that's my teva, that's my nature, that's my natural inclination. But it's very difficult for her, and understanding that which is easy for me doesn't make it easy for her, or the opposite, is one of the great barriers to being happily married. And I'll say it here as clearly as I can because you need to convey this message. Changing your spouse is taking your will and imposing it on their will. I'm in charge. I'm the one who's going to determine how it's going to be. You're going to pay the bills on time. You're not going to overspend. You're going to do things my way. It's my will against her will. And you know what that's called in plain language? It's called bullying. Changing your spouse is bullying. And now, what you're doing is just really not nice. Now, what if you bully in a nice way, or discreetly, or subtly, or with consequences, or with a sense of humor? You're still bullying. What you're doing is you're imposing your will on your spouse's will, and it's nasty, it's dirty, it destroys the relationship, and it never works. So you'll excuse me for being very strong on this point, but I believe it is one of the major obstacles, because hashkafically, most young women, when they get married, feel they have to change their husband. I've heard many women say these words. If I'm not doing that, I'm not being an Ezer Kenegdo. I'm not doing my job. Ladies, research this. I spent a lot of time. I looked through the Rishonim, I looked through the Achronim. I can't say I did a worlds of research, but I did a lot of research. I spent many years in yeshiva, for the record. I never once saw any Rishon, any Achron, any yeshiva define Ezer Kenegdo as mentor, police lady, cop, boss, bully. I never saw that definition. Ezer Kenegdo means helpmate. Helpmate opposite your spouse. That means to say an Ezer, a helpmate. It doesn't mean a mentor, it doesn't mean a bully, it doesn't mean a teacher, and it doesn't mean a Rebbitzin. And I think it's very important to convey to the young women this idea because it is one of the biggest obstacles to a successful marriage. And I see this over and over. And by the way, sometimes the nicest, sweetest Beis Yaakov girl, she's so tamimistic and so pure, and she gets married, and Hashem Yerachem, the way she bosses around her husband, it's frightening. All for his good, all for his benefit, make no mistake, only because she loves him, but don't do it. Okay, so here we got to do. We have to learn the inner world of your spouse. And now, this I believe is a very important point to mention, and that is the two most important words in your marriage. And this, I spent some time in the book and the video book also, and it's worth really focusing. What are the two most important words in your marriage? And you can ask most people this question, and you'll get some good answers. You'll get, yes, dear, please, thank you, good morning, I was wrong, I'm sorry. By the way, I was wrong are the most difficult words to say. I know I was wrong. She knows I was wrong. I know she knows I was wrong, but I can't say the words. Okay, those are the most difficult words to say. I get that. But those are not the two most important words. The two most important words in your marriage are the words, that's strange. You see, I say this all the time to women. I say it to men as well. The next time you see your spouse doing something that's inexplicable, it's mamish, he's a cruel, cold, callous creep. Why would he do that? If you take a step back and say, that's strange, he's a nice guy. He's a considerate guy. And why would he do something so nasty, so selfish, and act like such a lout? Why is that? You see, when you say the words, that's strange, you step back and you allow yourself the possibility of understanding what's actually going on. Every scientific discovery was preceded by an expression. People think it's eureka. It's not. It's that's strange. The guy took chemical X, chemical Y, mixed it, expected Z. Instead, he got something else altogether. He discovered penicillin, or he discovered rubberite, vulcanized rubber, or whatever it may be. Almost every scientific discovery was preceded by the words, that's strange. And when you stop and you say the words, that's strange, you open yourself up to the scientific curiosity to understand your spouse. But ladies, please tell the kallahs, they say it to themselves, not to their chassan. You say to yourself, that's strange. He's a nice guy. He's a considerate guy. Why would he do something so mean, so hurtful to me? When you stop and say to yourself, that's strange, you're then able to step back and analyze with scientific curiosity, maybe because he didn't understand it the way I do. And maybe he didn't recognize things the way I do. Maybe the way he experienced things is different than the way I do. And you open yourself up to the possibility of actually understanding your spouse. So again, section 1 is a relationship. Section 2 is learning to live together. And now moving on to section number 3, communication. Now, the first rule in communication is we all think we're communication experts, and I'd like to share with you, rarely do we ever do it well. Let's begin with Chazal's definition. Chazal define partners in a marriage as reim ahuvim zeh et zeh. Reim ahuvim means best friends who love each other. But best friends who love each other means exactly that. Reim ahuvim, Rashi defines it, Reim ahuvim zeh et zeh, that's a chassan and kallah, best friends who love each other. Now that's all fine and well, but ask a couple who are married 10 years, are you guys friends? Are you guys friends? And I hate to tell you, I've seen many times where couples can even respect each other and they have the same outlook in life. And I guess they love each other, but if you hear the way they talk to each other, they're not friends and they're not acting as friends. And remembering that you're best friends and remembering that friendship is a huge part of a successful marriage is part of being happily married. And there are 4 rules of friendship. I'm only going to share one with you now because I think it's very key and essential. The very first rule of friendship, here we go. A guy comes home at 6:30, he's exhausted, he's tired, he plops himself down on the couch and he pulls out a Mishnayos and he's learning, very nice. One kid pulls down some svarim, another kid knocks over the coffee table, another kid knocks over the crayons. Anyway, his wife is in the kitchen and she's cooking and she says, I don't believe it, this guy's going to sit there. He's going to sit there just learning or looking at a sefer and the kids are going to destroy the place? I don't believe it. Anyway, the steam starts to rise and it's not from the pot, but it's from her ears. And it goes on and on. The kid knocks over this, knocks up. Finally, she stands there, she walks over to me and goes, all right, mister, up off that couch. Up off that couch. You're either taking care of the kids, you're cooking dinner, you're not sitting there any longer. Okay, here's the question. Was she right? Now, I don't have to tell you that obviously, if your wife is cooking dinner, the kids are wrecking the place, get up, be a mensch, take care of give a hand. I don't have to tell you that obviously he's not acting too intelligently. But at the same time, I'd also like to share with you, she's not doing a very good job either. And let's play it out for a minute. What happens is he gets up and he takes care of the kids. He plays with them, whatever. Then they give them dinner together. They give them baths. They put them to bed. And about 9 o'clock, things are settled down. And he's sitting on a couch. So she sits down right next to him, wants to spend some quality time with her husband. And as she sits over here, suddenly he kind of slides away. So she moves closer. And he slides further away. And she moves closer. And he slides. And for the life of her, she can't figure what's wrong with him. What's wrong with him is for the past 2 hours, like a tape recorder in his brain, have been playing the words she said. All right, mister, up off the couch. All right, mister, you're either taking care of the kids or you're doing dinner. You're not sitting here anymore. All right, mister, up off the couch. All right, mister, up off the couch. And he finally gets it. After 2 hours of that line playing again and again and again in his brain, he says to himself, I married a drill sergeant. I don't believe it. And while it's true that obviously he's wrong, you have to communicate. And the first rule in communication is remembering who's boss. Who's boss in a marriage? And this is an important question. Who's in charge in a marriage? Who wields the power? Who's the boss? And this is an essential yesod to any successful marriage. The answer is no one is boss. There's no carte blanche. No one has the right to say my way or the highway. And that might work, or it used to work maybe with employees and employers. It works, I guess, with prisoners and with wardens and prisoners. And maybe it works in the military, but it doesn't work in a marriage. Friends discuss things, friends negotiate matters, friends reach compromises, but friends don't threaten, intimidate, bully one another. They're equal partners with different roles. And the first rule of friendship is remembering that friends don't boss friends around. So how do I communicate? One thing for sure, that is not the way. Now you got the message across, but you damage the relationship. And in this section, we spend a lot of time on communication, the ways to communicate, etc. And I'm going to deal with one piece of this later on because this is an important part. But let's move on to part 4 because I want to go through the whole thing and then we'll take questions. This is part 4 is called Techniques for a Successful Marriage. Okay, now we have the art of the apology, understanding the fight, and how to fight. So let's deal with this very question, which we touched on a moment ago, how to communicate effectively. How do you do that? How do you communicate effectively? And this is a big deal issue. So number 1, the first thing to deal with is the big question. Should I bring it up? Meaning, he did this, she said that, this happened, that happened. Should I bring it up? Should I bring it up? Okay, so this question, I believe, has an important perspective. Should you bring it up? I guarantee the following. For everything that bothers you that your spouse does, for everything that your spouse does that you wish he would do differently, I guarantee there are 5 things that he would bring up, but he's holding it back. You see, living with another human being means embracing a different lifestyle, a different approach, different temperament, different nature, different inclinations, and invariably different ways of doing things, and accepting and getting used to a different way of doing things, and accepting not my way, but the other way, but everyone knows it's not normal. All my girlfriends agree that this is weird. That's maybe true. And it could be most women would agree, but it doesn't matter because that's not the way your husband does things. And even if all men would agree as well, it bothers him and it's not his way. And he has a right to be a human being as you have a right to be a human being. So the first rule is, should you bring it up? Whatever you could ignore, learn to ignore. Whatever you could embrace, learn to embrace. Whatever doesn't really bother you at the core, try to ignore, because it takes a long time to really get used to a different way of doing things. But what if it's something that actually impacts the relationship? It really affects the relationship and impacts the real day-to-day living. In that case, you really do have to bring it up, because otherwise it's going to fester and it's going to wreck the way, it's going to wreck the relationship. So there are things that you do have to bring up. But again, the first rule is whatever you could ignore, whatever you could absorb, whatever you could embrace, because again, I guarantee your spouse has many, many things that he is putting up with that bother him as much. So the rule is embrace whatever you can. But if it's something that you do need to talk about because it impacts the relationship and it's really hurting you and it's really bothering you, then if you want to communicate, you have to know how to do it. And ladies, here we go. How do you communicate? It's really as simple as pie. All you have to do is remember to be nice. Be nice. All you got to do is be nice and your communication will go beautifully. But nice, or Rashi Tevos, it's an acronym. Nice stands for number 1, N, and never in the heat of the moment. Never when you're upset, never when you're angry, not when you're hurt, angry, annoyed, embarrassed, tired, or hungry. Why? Because those words are going to come out emotionally charged. And the minute you're going to speak in an emotionally charged manner, your spouse is not going to be receptive. It's going to be very, very difficult. You're going to shut them down. Effective communication means I want to bring my spouse into my perspective. I have a way of viewing this. I have a way of feeling about this. I have a way of experiencing this, and I want my spouse to share that. But to effectively communicate, I have to bring them into my world. I have to allow him to feel what I feel, sense what I sense, but he's got to be open to it. So be nice. N, never in the heat of the moment. That's N. I stands for I statements only. Watch the following. You hurt me. You embarrassed me. You made me feel badly. You is accusatory. With the finger, it gets much more accusatory, but you is an accusation. I felt hurt. I feel badly. I feel embarrassed. You accuses. I is a legitimate expression of feeling. I feel badly. I feel embarrassed. It's a legitimate expression, and if you want to really master this, you could even give it a superpower. You apologize. I feel terrible. Maybe I'm too sensitive, but I feel hurt. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I'm embarrassed. You're expressing your feelings. You're not accusing. You're explaining to your spouse where you're coming from. The problem is when the you statement, it's an accusation and it pushes them away and pushes them down. So to communicate effectively, you have to remember to be nice and never heat of the moment. I statements only. And C, and this is a biggie, folks. C means compliment first. Before you sit down and discuss this, and before you bring up this difficult topic, grease the wheels a little bit. Say a sincere, legitimate compliment. You know, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. You're so responsible, and you're so good with the kids. And I always love the fact that you keep Sidorim, and you're so into learning. And I feel so secure in your presence. Why do that? Number one, you should do it all the time anyway. It is a wise woman who compliments a husband, a wise man who compliments his wife. But number two, do you understand how much easier it makes to take that bitter pill that's going to follow that? Now, I once had a guy who said, Rabbi Shafier, your trick doesn't work. I tried it and it doesn't work. Every time I compliment my wife, she then says to me, okay, what did I do wrong now? So here's the punchline. If the only time you compliment your spouse is when you're going to then criticize them, you blew it. You have to be free and generous with your compliments. You have to notice what people do well and make sure that they know it, that you are the conveyor of those wishes, and especially in your marriage, you have to make it very clear that you love your husband, you respect him. Whatever is valuable to him, you have to find those areas that he excels in and let him know in his terminology, in his words, in ideas that matter to him, how much you respect him. So, if you want to communicate effectively, you have to remember to be nice and never in the heat of the moment. I, statements only. C, compliment first. And what's E? You got to be nice. But what's E? What does E stand for? So this is the punchline. Effective communication starts soft. Start gentle. Start low volume. Start with easy words. You see, the emotionally charged message repels the other person. When I come on strong, it's natural, it's instinctive. Or Chassidim explains, imagine that I start punching someone. I walk over, I start punching him. It's instinctive, it's natural, it's self-defense. He's going to punch me back. Or Chassidim explains it's the same thing with words. If I attack you verbally, it's instinctive, it's natural, it's self-defense. You're going to fight back. An effective communication begins soft. So as long as you remember to be nice, N, never in the heat of the moment. I statements only. C, compliment first. E, effective communication starts soft. You'll know exactly how to do it. And let's do one more and then we're going to wrap up this part. Let's discuss the art of the apology. Again, unfortunately, it's very natural and very normal within the context of the finest people from the best homes with the greatest midos. I don't realize what it meant to her. She didn't understand what it meant to me. I said, she said, before you know, we hurt each other. We're both vulnerable. And I blew it. I hurt her feelings. Okay. How do you resolve the conflict? How do you bring it back to normal? By the way, the success or failure of a marriage is not based on how much you fight and not how often you fight. And I hate to say not even how severely your fights are. It's based on whether you're able to bring back the relationship to equilibrium. Are you able to repair the damage? Are you able to repair the rift and move on? those couples who don't fight much, but when they do fight are not able to bring themselves back to an equilibrium, not be able to rekindle the love, those are the couples that find themselves drifting apart and find themselves in very, very difficult straits. There are many couples that fight a lot, especially in the beginning years, and it's okay. They repair the rift, they go on. Every few weeks, or whatever it is, things come up, and unfortunately words are said, feelings are hurt. But as long as you can repair the rift, it's okay. The relationship remains intact, and sometimes it becomes stronger than before. But to repair the rift, you have to know the art of the apology. The art of the apology has 4 parts, so we're going to do only one part now, and this is the key part that you have to really understand so that you can give over. The key to apologizing is understanding, what do couples fight about? And this is a very important question to ask. What is it that couples fight about? Is it religion? Is it children? Is it money? Is it in-laws? My place, your parents' house, my parents' house? What is it that couples fight about? And I'd like to share with you, if you study this very carefully, and I mean very carefully, and I have, if you study it very carefully, you'll find it's never the issue. It's never the religion or the frumkeit or the kids or the behavior. It's never the issue. It's always the hurt feelings. How could you do this to me? You're supposed to be my closest friend. You're supposed to be my lover. You're supposed to be there in my corner. How could you do that? It's never about the issue. It's always about the hurt feelings. And I can't tell you how obvious this is, but how important it is to recognize. Because if you're going to stick to the issue from today till next year, you'll never stop the fights and you'll never cure it. Because as long as you stick, all right, fine, we'll do it your way. All right. And she's not even happy. Even if I did it her way, she's still not happy. What's wrong with her? What's wrong with her? Because it's not the issue. It's the feeling. She felt abandoned. She felt hurt. He felt not respected. He felt you don't care about his feelings. And when you understand it's never the issue, but it's always the feelings, then you begin to understand the art of the apology. The art of the apology, first point to understand is, what are you apologizing for? It's never the issue. It's the pain that you caused. And these are the words. You're the most precious thing in the world to me. I love you more than anything. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. And I feel terrible because clearly I caused you pain, and that's the worst thing that I could ever have done. And then you do this, ladies, excuse me, my saying it this way, then you do that thing we human beings have a tough time doing. I was going to say shut up, but you be quiet. Never destroy a good apology with a but. But. Now we all try to do it. Do you understand what we try to do? The first rule of the art of apology is, you know what you're apologizing for the hurt feelings. Don't ruin a good apology with a but. You know what a but does? The apology says, I'm sorry. The but says, it was justified. Under these circumstances, under these conditions, it was justified. Don't ruin a good apology with a but. What the apology says is, this is the worst thing that I hurt my beloved, the one I love, the one I can't believe I did this. And that's a fine apology. And the but says, under these circumstances, I had to take care of the kids, or my boss needed the report. And the but says what I did was just, not bad enough. He doesn't feel bad. He's telling me how right it was. Don't ruin a good apology with a but. Say I was wrong and that was it. Okay, let's just very quickly do one last part, and that is section 5. Section 5, the damage of criticism. I have only one thing to say here. Ladies, please listen carefully, because it's one thing and it's one thing only. And if you could convey this one thing, you will have accomplished so much good. Here we go. You ready? Constructive criticism and fairy tales. What do constructive criticism and fairy tales have in common? The answer really is quite simple. They both never happened, but some fairy tales have happy endings. What do constructive criticism and fairy tales have in common? The one thing they have in common is they both never happened, but some fairy tales have happy endings. What I'm saying in plain simple language is the destruction of many marriages is based on this evil C. It's called criticism. But I was doing it for his good. I was doing it to help him. I wanted to make him better. But criticism erodes the fabric of the relationship. Criticism destroys the very nature of the relationship. Criticism never works. It never helps. It never gains anything. All it does is distance people. And there are 3 rules of criticism. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it because it just creates a rift between people. Don't do it because it wrecks the relationship. but don't do it because it never helps. It may feel good in the moment. We'll have this view. All I have to do is tell my spouse in very clear terms what she did wrong, and suddenly she'll change, and it never works. I hope you found this meaningful. It was my version of just a quick recap of the 10 really dumb mistakes. The 10 really dumb mistakes is available both as the regular book as well as the video book. Tonight was really a recap of the video book. The video book is available on the shmooze.com. You could purchase it. You could also get the online course, and it contains the essence of the book, but in a very engaging format. It's 50 short videos. Each video is about 3 to 4 minutes in length, and it's animated. You open up the video book, and you'll see it begins playing, and the animation starts. It's I don't know if you could hear the volume on this, but basically, I'm going to move the microphone so you can hear it. It has a very cute animated version of the 10 really dumb mistakes, and basically it plays throughout the process. What it does is it takes the content of the book and really lays it out in a very clear, engaging manner, and it really is a great way to learn. It's something that I highly recommend. If you'd like a copy of either the 10 Really Dumb Mistakes actual book or the video book, if you go to the shmooze.com, THESHMUZ.com, you could see it's available for sale. It's inexpensive, and it makes a great wedding gift. It makes a great chassan and kala gift. It's also excellent for couples who are married already and they want to work on the marriage together or separately. Please go to the shmooze.com, THESHMUZ.com, and you could avail yourself of it. When you purchase it on the shmooze.com, you'll also get access to the online version, as well as you'll have the options to purchase the audiobook or the ebook. So please go to the shmooze.com. I wish you much, much hatzlacha. Thank you.